Thank you for the invitation, and thank you so much for the generous introduction as well. I think, I'll tell you what, I'm going to stand in the middle of the stage so that it's easier for me to do the control and also to have a proper eye contact with the team. So this is, I've been to Delhi quite a number of times, but this is the first time that I've been to Delhi that is cold. And when my boss and my ex-boss and now currently friend Ashish would have kind of like shared also the same thing, that whenever I come to Delhi, things would happen. So the first time I came to Delhi, the earth shook. And then there was earthquake in Delhi. So at that point of time, I was working in GSK, and you can see Ashish over there. And we rushed down from the building, so that and then we gathered in front of the One Horizon Center. So that was the point of time in 2015 when I was in Delhi. And the second time when I went back to Delhi, the wind blew. And there was a typhoon that happened, and therefore some trees fell down in one of the factories in GSK as well. And this time now, when I'm back in Delhi, I was told that the cold wave is here. And it happened on the day that I was arriving in Delhi. So I wonder if this trend were to continue, will I be invited next time to Delhi? Or will I be placed a travel ban to come to Delhi next time? So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about health and well-being, because you would have heard of health and well-being in the industries that you're working in. And in the context of NUS, we are the #1 university in Asia, depending on which ranking that you use. Some ranking rank us as #3 in Asia. I would still prefer to use the ranking that put us as #1. So we are the #1 in Asia. And if you were to look at the health and well-being in NUS, it is placed under Office of the President. It is not under HR. It is not under the health and safety. It is under the Office of the President, which means that we have a lot of executive power and resources allocated to us to drive changes and to also implement strategies. Health and well-being is not new. Johnson & Johnson is one that has been around for a long period of time, and they have the credo since the World War II, which explicitly mentioned that we must support the health and well-being of our employees and help them fulfill their family and other personal responsibilities. So in 2015, things start to change. And that is when we start to realize that a lot of pharmaceutical companies and even oil and gas companies start to have the health and well-being center of excellence. And it started to move on. And in the context of NUS, that's when I joined in the midst of COVID, November 2020, and we start to set up this health and well-being as well. And they all have a common denominator. They all have a very strong occupational health system in place, hiring occupational health professionals, especially in the leadership area. Now, so when I went into the market in November 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, we start to hire consulting psychologists or psychologists in my team, because mental health and well-being was a big thing at that point in time. You start to see that tech companies are also coming into the space of health and well-being. And we are not alone. So pharmaceutical companies and oil and gas companies and the manufacturing companies start to have the health and well-being first. Subsequently, now you're seeing that the well-being becomes a bigger phenomenon also in the tech companies. And when you take a look at the roll call in the LinkedIn last year, you'll find that there are new titles being formed, including the well-being titles. And as you can see, there's also the Global Wellbeing Program Manager at TikTok, which is one of the most popular platforms in the earth right now. So health and well-being is a legit business. It's a legit industry. And I think that as occupational health physicians, you are at a very good position to lead the health and well-being. I'm going to share a little bit of our experience in NUS, where we care for 13,000 staff and 45,000 students across more than 115 departments. If you want to start off with any health and well-being organization, always start off with a mission, because once you start off with a mission, it is much easier for you to use that as a North Star and as a conversation with your fellow colleagues and also with your leadership team. Then subsequently, you want to prioritize. In our mission over here, you can see that health and well-being is big. You have a physical, mental, social well-being, but we want to prioritize mental well-being because of we were in the midst of a pandemic at the point of time. What is important in terms of having a mission is that you want to help our employees lead a meaningful life, where they say that this life is meaningful. Then you know the well-being is there. So when I went into the NUS, what is the situation over there? So before we move on, I would like to ask for your cooperation that you do not take any photos. The reason is because we want to use this to actually share our experience with you. So if you can avoid the use of taking photos of the sensitive data, I think that will be greatly appreciated. We realize that the increase in the utilization and the demand for counseling services among the students year on year. So if you were to take a look at the light blue bar, which represents the number of counseling cases among the students or the young people, you find that it is increasing by almost 40%. And then they also need longer support. We realize that for students who need counseling, they require approximately 30% more counseling support than in the past. For the diagnosis and the reason why they come to see us, you'll find that it is no longer just anxiety and mood, but personal concern in terms of self-image becomes the more predominant issue that our students are concerned about. This is very typical of a social media digital natives where our children are growing up in, because they view the lens of the world through social media, and as a result, they become very conscious about how they project themselves and how they look like. Even among the staff, so these are adults, they're staff, we are seeing an increased utilization of EAP utilization, and employees coming out to say that they need help with our professionals. And every month you will find that there are some high-risk cases. High-risk cases includes people who have suicide attempt, ideation, or even vulnerable adults. And when you take a look at some of the diagnoses over here, you can see that workplace concerns rank number one in terms of why they are feeling the way that they are feeling, in terms of feeling stressed or having some form of distress. And you'll find that every alternate month, there will be staff who have attempted suicide before, not in the university in itself, but in their own social life. What we are uncovering is probably just the tip of the iceberg, and whatever we are uncovering in our organization is probably a replication of quite a number of organizations in the context of Singapore and also in the world. Now, the topic of today that I wanted to share about is how do you actually implement program systematically, and this is where we want to go into a bit of a conversation on. So this is the framework that we have developed. It's called the WellNUS framework. It is developed in-house to systematically approach and identify potential gaps in the organization. We copyrighted it. We also want to make it free of charge for every one of you to use. So it charts a person's well-being journey. As you can see, most of us have a high mental high and good physiological capacity. So we do not need so much of the help that is needed. Some of us are probably stressed because we have a project to meet and we are not sleeping or eating well, but we are still productive, so our capacity is still low. But some of our colleagues might be having clinical issues, whether it's medical issues or mental health issues, and therefore they will require their physiological capacity is low, and some of them are also on the recovery road. So as a result, when you actually map it out, you are able to identify what are the limitations and the programs that you can put in place to help our fellow colleagues lead a better life. So over here you'll find that EAP has its own limitations over here. Whether or not, and some of our fellow colleagues might require additional psychiatrist or psychological access, then you will need to enhance your medical plan. And do you have a return to work service for those who are under recovery? And when you put in more people into doing this gap analysis, you find that there's a lot more programs that you can influence, and that includes setting expectation, flexi framework adjustment. Do you have campaigns? And at the topmost level, do you have a C-suite committee to help allocate resources and also drive a strategy for your health and well-being? So when you map all these things out, you can even do a color coding or for your organization to provide a heat map in terms of where your organization is when it comes down to the program implementations. So the green items are the items that are already in place. The yellow are those that are still in progress. And the items that are in blue might be expensive, but you want to put it there for the time being. So for example, staff disability income or income protection is an insurance product, but it is very costly to implement. So at that point in time, we do not have any resources that have been set aside to purchase staff disability income for our staff. And lastly, you need to monitor the effectiveness. I'll spend a bit of time to talk a little bit also about peer care, peer support. This is a pyramid of care that all staff will have access to. For example, at the most basic level, do our staff have access and knowledge in terms of the resources that they have? And do we have a community of peer supporters who can help to look out for fellow staff members and signpost them to the right resources? Are your managers actually equipped with the right skill set to manage people with mental health issues or health and well-being? And a smaller group of people who might require some form of EAP care or psychologist care, and even smaller group of people would benefit from psychiatrists or psychologists in the hospital. We want to also share a little bit about campaigns. So a lot of companies might consider or reconsider the use of campaign because the question is, do they work? Because a lot of people will say that, hey, it seems like there's a lot of rah-rah show into it. You spend a lot of money, you announce what you're doing, but does it really work? Does it help change the behavior of our people? And so what we did is that we implemented this hashtag Are You OK campaign in 2021 through the internet and intranet services that we have. But this year, we went into social media. So we project and push our content in LinkedIn, in Facebook, and in Instagram. So we hire a marketing agency to help us manage the content online. And this has a strong reach to our students because our students are typically consuming their news and events on Telegram and also on the social media. And as a result of that campaign, we reached 4.6 million people in Singapore, and resulting in more than 64,000 post-engagement of our content. And you can see that there are a lot of qualitative feedback that we have also received that help people to know that they are not alone, to help people to step out, to help people to destigmatize the mental health conditions. So we want to measure, does it really work? So we did a pre-post analysis of our students and staff. And first, there is an increase in the respondents who are aware of the campaign. And we also noticed that both staff and students have better mental well-being at post-campaign, and this is statistically significant using the PHQ-2 score as part of our screening tool. We also measure, do they have lower stigma and lower social distancing or improved social distancing score? And you'll find that students and staff who have heard of the campaign had a significantly lower stigma and lower social distancing score, which means that they are more willing to embrace and have empathy to people with mental health conditions as part of their team members. So we saw this in students, we saw that also in staff. So staff who had heard of the campaign or consumed the content of the campaign, significantly lower stigma and more empathetic in their approach. And we also noticed that they are more willing to step out to seek help if they are, especially after consuming the contents of the campaign. So the campaign findings are there. We publish it so you can have access to it if you want to, and then you can just scan the QR code and this will be made available so that you can also use these data points to have a conversation with your senior leaders whenever you want to go into a canteen, some form of a campaign, and talk about the effectiveness. Now, this is the NUS peer support system that we have. The idea is that we create a community, a critical community of peer supporters to look out for one another and also to improve the psychological safety of our in the culture. And since 2 years ago, since 2021, we have more than 160 peer supporters, and we are increasing more to approximately 400 by end of this year. And you'll find that a lot of peer supporters are prepared to support the distressed colleague after attending the sessions. We can do this training also externally for any companies who would like to engage us, and then we will export our training programs to you if you like to. Because our training programs is bespoke, and we find that it has a lot of things that are very different that you won't find in the external organizations. We also developed the guide for managers. Again, we made it free of charge for you to download so that you can, if you are in the business of drafting policy pertaining to managers' expectations and behavior, you can download this and see whether you can use it. It is available free of charge. We just need you to just say that this is adopted from the NUS Health and Wellbeing, and then that's good enough. Now, even though we have gotten it into the social media, I've shown you the impact. The question is, is it also always so smooth sailing? Did we get it right all the time? Well, when we went into the social media, you need to expect and anticipate that there will be trolls and people coming in to actually say nasty things or be cynical about your product. And you can see over here, I'm tired of seeing the hashtag "Are you okay?" bullshit that turns up in my mailbox, you see. And if you really care about me, you should actually be coming to help me rather than putting this as an empty signaling. And you'll find that there are a lot of people who are occasionally putting very sarcastic remarks also towards the person who is seeking help. So it is very unfortunate that sometimes when you want to engage people in the in this space, in social media, then you do need to anticipate that there will be some of these online vitriol that will come about. So what is needed for your support is that whenever you're going to do a campaign or an outreach, you do need to have a dedicated team to screen and monitor online comments, curate personalized responses where possible, and it also generated a lot of information for you to gather ground sentiments and address the major feedback. So use this feedback to improve the future campaigns, and also you need to have quality services to back it up. You can't say that, hey, we have all these services, but your service provider or your vendors are just not strong enough. There is also the stigmatizing perception that is out there of senior leaders, and this can be quite upsetting, and they can impede the flow of your campaign and your initiatives, such as strawberry generation, very labeling, the type of labels that they use on our young people. So we do need to actually address some of this perception that is prevailing, especially among the senior leadership, and call it out, and so that we all can be aware of this unconscious bias in the company. I want to spend some time to talk. We have approximately 9 minutes left. I want to spend some time to talk about novel health and well-being risks that are out there in the horizon, and it's good for you to be aware of what's happening out there. Now, this is the company Facebook. Now it has been known as the Meta. They have this trust and safety team over here. The reason why they developed this trust and safety is to do some form of content moderation. And when they do content moderation, they have to be exposed to many explicit contents on their platform, such either whether you're on Facebook or Instagram. Now, the content moderators have to consume the content while they are working. So as a result, they suffer the mental health condition known as post-traumatic stress disorder or vicarious trauma. And as a result of consuming the content and trying to do the censorship, they are traumatized because sometimes some of the contents are very explicitly gory, and that includes abuse that is being recorded and then placed online on Facebook. And what happened is that some of the contents that you can see over here, someone is stabbing him dozens of times while he screams and begs for his life, and this is some of the trauma that these content moderators have to go through. And this would result in psychological trauma, risky behavior, co-worker relationship, alcoholism, loneliness. Now the question is, if you have jobs that are similar profile in your industry, how would you risk manage that? All right? There's no engineering control, or is there an engineering control that you can actually work on to actually reduce such risk? So think about that. We also talk about metaverse. Trying to use metaverse in our curriculum, or even metaverse in our training program. But metaverse also brings about its own risk. and that includes a social risk, such as virtual groping, sexual assaults that occur into metaverse. But when things like this, for example, this lady was so-called raped virtually in the virtual space, is there a law that governs that? Because if you are raped in the virtual space, but the rape didn't occur in the physical realm, so how do you actually risk manage this type of issues? Now, why am I saying all these things? Because companies now are investing in metaverse technology to help employees to connect better in the metaverse because of the social distancing impact, and as a result to be future ready for future pandemic. If you were to actually invest in metaverse technology to help facilitate conversation and engagement, then these are some of the risks that will come along. So how do you actually risk manage that if that were to come into your respective company? The next one would be business travel and impact on sleep. We know that if you were to do a lot of frequent business travel, it has an impact on the sleep. And we know that chronic sleep restriction is real, and it is very interesting, because if you are sleep deprived for 2 weeks, just only 2 weeks, and all you need is just 4 hours of sleep and you don't feel tired. And this is when some of the bosses and some people will have the perception to say that, hey, I only need 4 hours of sleep and I don't need additional sleep anymore and I can be productive. But if you want to put the person through some form of a performance testing, the physical performance and also the mental health performance, that person will perform poorly and not performing well. But the person is not feeling sleepy. And that has linked to hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and temperament. So all these things will have an impact on health and safety on the ground, and also in terms of the decision-making process for our people. So how do you risk manage that for your company? Because it is part of health and well-being. We are very good in terms of injury prevention, sleep, trips and falls, chemical exposure prevention. But when it comes down to things that are less tangible, I think that's where occupational mental health needs to come into place. We need to actually improve and level up our skills in managing some of these things. Now, with the advent of Zoom or Microsoft Teams, we now have virtual meeting, and it's so easy to pack your meetings back to back, such that you have insufficient time to even go for your break. Now the question is, in the planning of a long meeting, what should you do? Should you actually have frequent breaks? Do you discuss the 4 approval item first, or do you want to discuss the 4 information items? So this is talking about how do you improve.
You have 5 minutes only. Please conclude.
Yeah, 5 minutes, right? Yeah. I'm looking at the timer. So these are the last few slides. What the studies have shown that if I were to actually get you to be, if you do not have sufficient sleep, it impacts your decision making, because it has affected the decision making process of the judges that was done. So they find that the percentage of favorable rulings drops gradually from 65% to nearly zero within each decision session, and returns abruptly to 65% after a break. So this study is actually studying about 1,000 or more than 1,000 judges' decision, and the decision is to see whether they grant paroles or not. So what happens is that at the start of the session, okay, the positive paroles were granted more, but as the session goes on, you'll find that the percentage of favorable decision actually drop. Then you have a coffee break or tea break, and then after that it goes up again. And you see these patterns forming again with in a cyclical pattern. So the question is, okay, maybe the easy cases are placed at the front, but the more difficult cases are at the back. So they try to identify, okay, the easy cases, right? The easy cases, the first 3 cases they find, these are the first 3 cases. For the easy cases, you'll find that there are higher chance of getting a favorable outcome. The last 3 cases, before a break, they have a lower chance of getting a favorable outcome. Difficult cases are also facing the same thing. There is a disparity between the first 3 cases and the last 3 cases, and because of prolonged sessions. So how would you risk manage in a company in terms of ways of working, in terms of managing sufficient break time for your to maintain the health and well-being, and also the peak performance of your decision-making capability? So, summary, health and well-being is more than just mental health or wellness activities and physical activities. The decision-making process is always involuntarily affected by external factors. Health and well-being as a whole is about unlocking your human performance through human physiological hacks, so which means sufficient sleep, sufficient rest, sufficient support, and the external programs that we put into. And I also want to end off with this consideration that you may want to consider adopting this WELL-NUS framework in your corporate approaches to be more systematic in your health and risk management. So that's it in terms of my presentation. Thank you.